Are Christians cursed if they do not tithe? That's the subject of today's video. Stick around. Welcome to the Prophet Dare. Thank you for joining me today. We're going to continue talking about Malachi 3. And if you haven't heard some of the previous discussions, I would encourage you to go through those as well. But today, we're going to talk specifically about curses for not tithing, Malachi 3:9. So let's get into it. I'm hoping to keep this video to less than 10 minutes. Good luck.
That ain't gonna happen.
Will a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me. How have we robbed you? In tithes and offerings. You are under a curse, the whole nation of you, because you are robbing me. That's the text, Malachi 3:8 and 9. Can Christians or are Christians cursed for not giving 10% of their income to the local church?
Curse? What curse?
Now, it takes a lot of different definitions to understand what's happening here. I did a video previously on what are the tithes and offerings in Malachi. And I'm going to do really quick here. The tithes, there were 3 tithes, possibly 4, depending on how you classify them. So the first tithe was the Levitical tithe, which was 10% of crops. Every 10th animal was given. There was an additional tithe for the festivals, and another tithe for the charity tithe, which was given every 3rd and 6th year. So every year for 1 and 2 was 20% of crops and every 10th animal. 3rd year, 30% of crops and every 10th animal. 4th and 5th, 20% of crops and every 10th animal. 6th year, 30% of crops and every 10th animal. In the 7th year, no one tithed, no one worked in the farming communities. So there's that. The offerings were the grain offering, the burnt offering, the peace offering, the sin and trespass offerings. And these offerings were actually developed or given and executed upon daily to atone for sins. They were given weekly as the Sabbath offerings, monthly for new moon offerings, and annually during the festivals. And these were also grain, wine, oil, and actual animals. Did money ever exchange hands from the 11 tribes to the Levites for tithes and offerings? And the answer is no. The only exception to that would have been if a person wanted to redeem part of their tithe to the Levitical tithe on the crop side, they could. And when they did, there was a 20% surcharge added.
Give me the money.
So if you had a bushel of whatever, some kind of grain that was the $10 tithe, and you're like, yeah, I don't want to carry that to the Levitical city, I'm going to give money instead, you had to pay $12. It was like a 20% surcharge to that. So the idea is that God really wanted food and not money. Money exchanged hands between the tribe of Levite and the 11 tribes for the temple tax, for the redemption of the firstborn, and for census. Those are the 3 times money exchanged hands. Moses took an offering in Exodus 25 to actually build the temple, like a building fund offering. That was a free will offering. And there are a couple other smatterings of free will offerings throughout the Old Testament. But by and large, the tithes and offerings, as referenced by Malachi, were not money. And so we really, as New Testament Christians, it's difficult, almost I would say dangerous for us to superimpose Old Testament way of doing things on a New Testament church. And I'll explain why in a minute more clearly. But one, if we're going to follow the Old Testament way of doing things, we should do it correctly and do it as they did it. And so will a Christian be cursed for not giving 10%? I would first of all push back and say, if you're going to follow the tithing concept, it never was 10%. It was 20 or 30, depending on the year. And so the 10% even is kind of like a cop-out for those who believe in tithing.
Cheapskate.
It's also, so that's one thing. And 2 is the whole idea, can you be cursed? And the cursing idea is kind of weird. And so here's how I've heard it in the church. If you do not give 10% of your income to the church, everything you have is cursed. So if you buy something with that cursed money, that curse falls upon that stuff. Practical example. You buy a new car, you're making payments on the car, and all of a sudden your car is hit in a parking lot. Someone backed into your car and just ran away. a tree falls on your house and busts the roof open. Your brakes go out, your water pump goes out, your refrigerator breaks just after the warranty expires. All these things because you've bought stuff with cursed money and all that money is cursed. That's a weird thought. The feeling is better to have 90% blessed than 100% cursed. So I would say that is stretching what really is happening here. Plus, again, the amount expected is a lot less than was expected in the Old Testament. And I'm not sure why we get a break and get only 10% if they were actually giving 20 or 30 and more, depending on the time of year. But the curse there, that curse of something falling on your house or your car getting wrecked, is very minimal compared to the actual curse that God pronounced upon Israel. And that can be found in Deuteronomy 28 and Leviticus, I believe 26, is where it's the blessing and cursing chapter. If somebody held the law perfectly, just obeyed every single jot and tittle of the law, then they would be blessed. And there was 13 verses or 12 verses of the blessings that would come upon them. If they stumbled in one area, verses 16 through 68 in Deuteronomy 28 talks about the curses. And I'm telling you, you should read those curses. Those curses are ghastly. They're awful. You can't even imagine some of the stuff happening to somebody. And it's simply because they did not obey the law 100% and perfectly. Now we know that only one person was able to do that, and that was Jesus. And now since Jesus fulfilled the law, we are redeemed from those curses. In Galatians 3, it says, Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law. Those are the curses. Having become a curse for us, because it is written, cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree, that the blessing of Abraham could come on the Gentiles, and they would receive the promise through faith. So Abraham was made righteous before circumcision. We are made righteous through Christ. We are made righteous through Christ. We are not made righteous through any kind of extra work we add on top of what Jesus already did. Jesus said it's finished. He's done all he's going to do and all that needed to be done. And here's where it gets dangerous for us in the area of tithing and other laws that we try to add on top of the grace and the redemptive power and the blood of Jesus, is we think we can add to this. Now, he's redeemed us from the curse of the law. If we think by any stretch of the imagination that we can just by giving 10% of our income that we can add to what Jesus already did, we are full of pride and we are really walking in dangerous territory.
Pride comes first, not gluttony.
Now, I heard somebody say the other day, and this is a famous preacher said this. He's like, maybe that blessing come upon you is not monetary. Maybe your kid is astray or your marriage is in the tank, so to speak, and you could have that blessing just by giving 10%. I thought that was just sad that someone would say that, and even sadder they believe that, because also what's being said is if you don't give that 10%, your kid could go astray, and your marriage could go in the tank. We have to be so cautious of what we're saying, but we are redeemed from the curse of the law, not by anything we've done, but what Christ has done. Do we still do good things? Yes. Ephesians 2:10 says we are created for good works, but our good works don't save us. Our good works are a reflection of our gratitude towards Jesus. And whenever we start adding to what Jesus already did, we start getting in really bad territory. Paul said in Galatians, he said that if you want to be circumcised, you have to keep the whole law. Let me go ahead and read that real fast. I'll butcher it. Again, I declare to you, every man who lets himself be circumcised, he is obligated to keep the whole law, obey the whole law. You who are trying to be justified by the law have been alienated from Christ. Some say severed from Christ. You have fallen from grace. Verse 9, a little yeast works through the whole batch of dough, meaning a little bit of legalism will corrupt the whole thing. And I would suggest that when we are trying to undo any kind of curse by tithing, One, we are thinking we can add to the works of Christ, and that's a different kind of gospel. Paul warned the whole book of Galatians about trying to add to the completed work of Christ. And so I encourage you to, one, think about this deeply. And if you're a person who has been struggling because you've heard you are cursed because you're not giving 10%, maybe you can't give 10%. Maybe it's impossible. And you're under condemnation right now because someone told you that and you believe it. And then you justify, oh my God, I am cursed because something broke down. Hear me, please hear me. Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law, right? So we're redeemed from the curse of the law, but we're not immune from the effects of the fall. Your car will get dinged in a parking lot. You will get sick once in a while. Bad things are going to happen to good people. But that doesn't mean you're cursed. That means we live in a sin-cursed world, and we're trying to navigate it. So we must contend every day with the effects of the fall. We are not immune to bad things happening because we bought protection by giving our 10%. That's a false narrative, probably a false gospel, and it's bad teaching. And I want you to be free from that. Back into Galatians 5, it's for freedom that Christ set us free. It's hard. Christian ministers should not set a minimum expectation for giving. Paul never did. Peter never did. James never did. None of them did. We have to give by grace. We have to give as we purpose in our heart, not under compulsion, not when we're manipulated, not when we're controlled, not when we're coerced, but when we're joyful. And that's what it is. Christian, believer, brother, sister, you are not cursed for not tithing. One, you can't tithe. There is no temple. There is no priesthood. We're the priesthood right now. We're the temple of the Holy Spirit now. There is no Levitical order anymore, and so you can't do it. And when you try to do it, you superimpose the law back on yourself, and then you're obligated to keep the whole law. And so you can't pick and choose which ones you like. You can't say, "Oh, the tithe is great because that's really easy for me to do the math on," and I'll take that one. But I like tattoos and shellfish, so that they can keep that one over there in the world of Israel. But I'll keep the tithe and I'll keep the blessing part. No, the law is obsolete. Hebrews 8 is very clear. The law is obsolete, and we have a better covenant. We have a better way of giving, and we're free to give as much as we want. We're not limiting what God can do through us. We're not saying all I have to do is give 10%. No, we're saying, God, I want to give it all, and I want you to lead me and guide me and show me how to do this so I can be a blessing. Malachi 3:9, again, you're not cursed. You're not under curse. If you're part of the family of God, if you submitted your life to Christ, He's redeemed you from that curse. Make sense? Well, I hope this has helped somebody out there. If it has, please like, subscribe, share, comment, and I will do my best to keep up with the comments. And I will see you soon with a new video. I'll continue with these as much as I can. Until then, I dare you to profit so you can practice, promote radical, revolutionary, fearless generosity. I will see you soon. Until then, blessings to you.